Three, two, one, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Fours podcast, a podcast from three Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 2, episode 26, and today we are going to be talking about another classic film that inspires us with its awesome philosophy and religion and everything, all those goodies that we love about Star Wars. Now, this movie, obviously, spoiler alert, but at this point, if you haven't watched this movie, just do yourselves a favor, turn this off and go into
Go
HBO
watch it.
Max
Yeah.
and go watch The Matrix, a film that I think collectively blew all of our little minds back in the day.
Oh yeah.
So I hadn't actually watched it in years, and then we got this awesome trailer for the new Matrix Resurrections that's coming out this December. So I had no idea what to expect, and then we'll get to the trailer, obviously, but in honor of that, we're going to be talking about the original film. Now, I rewatched it just for this, and I just want to know what you guys' like general opinion is. Does it hold up? Did you enjoy it? Who wants to get started?
I'll get started because I'm like, that trailer was so good. I mean, we'll get to the trailer, but to preface my opinion on the original Matrix, the marketing for that trailer was so good because it just reminded me of how they did the marketing like for the original one. They reused the same website of like whatisthematrix.com, and the trailer was interactive because every time you hit one of the teaser trailers of the red pill or the blue pill, it always said the time, the precise time that you were watching the trailer on. So I'm like, I was hyped up for this trailer for Matrix 4. And then the trailer dropped and I was like, oh yes, I am ready to get plugged back in. So immediately went to HBO Max, and to my surprise, they had the whole Matrix trilogy upgraded to 4K, Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision. And I was, needless to say, I went on a binge of watching the original trilogy. And I have to say that the original Matrix holds up just as much as it did back in 1999, if not better. And 2 and 3, I think, have aged pretty well. I still think 3 is the weakest of the trilogy, although in this rewatch, I feel like it's gotten a lot more hate than it deserves. I mean, it's still not the best, but I don't think it's that bad, like looking at all 3 of the movies and now with like 10 years of of time to let them age. But Matrix 1, man, that's where the money's at. Is and now me thinking about it, 1999, what a glorious year for nerddom. We had episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and then we had The Matrix. It's an incredible time.
Beautiful.
What about you, Mo?
I thought it's a beautiful movie. It's a great cyberpunk dystopia movie in every sense. It mind blew my young brain, and now it just adds more and more layers of like reasoning and thinking and just going beyond what we claim to be reality, which
that's still relevant
for us. We don't, well, no, it's just a random simulation that's happening here in our brains. So just that's the beauty of it. I love that the movie still like visually holds up. Like so many movies stole from Matrix. It's almost like you can see movies that are like before Matrix and after Matrix. Everybody like, oh, let's use the bullet time. Let's use like the slow-mo techniques. And I remember
superhero landings.
Yes, it brought back memories of like why I wanted to wear a trench coat.
Yes, everyone at Borders, everyone at the mall, sunglasses and trench coats.
Yes.
My mom didn't let me. She's like, "You're not buying a trench coat.
You're not buying that shit.
You're gonna regret it in 10 years." And actually, a good decision in hindsight.
Same thing. My parents were like, "No, we're not gonna buy that for you."
In 100-degree weather with a black trench coat.
It's like you're not wearing a trench coat. Maybe some boots, but not a trench coat.
I enjoyed every second of it. Sometimes those movies that you loved when you were growing up and then you haven't watched it in a long time, they kind of become idealized in your mind. And then when you rewatch them, it's like, that's not as good as I remember. That does not apply to The Matrix. It's exactly as good as I remember. It's really fun to watch. It's just like Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz had a love child with the Terminator. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Yes.
um
That's an orgy right there. That's good for them.
the action scenes are still amazing. I don't understand why Marvel and so many other action movies have fallen into this trap of like the shaky cam. It's so let me see the action scene, and The Matrix pulls it off fantastic. And then they take the superhero landing to another level, because you feel it when they strike the ground, like it has more weight to it. There are like a couple of the CGI scenes that don't hold up, like when the bugs like crawling around his stomach and stuff, but it's like so minor that I can't really nitpick it at all. I'm just being annoying here. But I remember that it just, there was so much of it that you can't really grasp, and even with like the other two, and now that watching it as I'm older, it's just like you said, Mo, there's so many more layers to the understanding of it. Because I remember,
like Shrek said, it's an onion, right? Yeah, has layers.
Yeah, because I remember some of my favorite scenes were obviously, like the action scenes and everything, but now some of my favorite scenes are like all those conversations about, reality and what's real and what makes something real. I mean, it's so good. And my only problem with the other two, that I didn't rewatch it, so I don't know how well they aged, is not necessarily that they were bad, even though they're not nearly as good as the first one. I think it's more that they were kind of unnecessary, because I feel like this first Matrix, it's almost a perfect film. You didn't really need anything else. The end is so like, optimistic and full of possibilities, and you can imagine a million ways that it can go. And then by doing the other two, you kind of restrict that feeling of, I can imagine anything from this point on. And then you also, he's so overpowered at the end that then in the other two, you kind of have to restrict his powers. So it doesn't really, it's like, wait, but wasn't he more powerful at the end of the first movie? Why is he like not as powerful now? So, I mean, there's some issues that I have with that, but we'll see what happens with the new addition to it and what they do. So
yeah, absolutely. And I love that the movie's just riddled with just like so many like visual cues and like hidden, like to hit the nail on it, like symbols and like allegories of what's happening. Like even the first scene, like Neo is living on room 101. Which is,
and he's the one. Well, and Trinity is in room 303.
Well, exactly. But you have to, if you see it from like computer perspective, like
binary,
the HTTP 101 is a code that says like, we're switching servers because it was requested by the client. So in a way, Thomas Anderson was requesting a server change. He was changing into Neo. And then 303 is actually an error code. It says you can't access that, and it redirects you to the new version. So that's pretty much what happens. Like Neo dies.
Yeah.
So I mean, Thomas Anderson dies in a way.
Yeah.
And it gets redirected to Neo, the one that the show. So it's such a beautiful like beginning and ending to it. Like you said, Nani, like it. Yeah, you're right. I don't think after I just finished watching it, I could have been without any more like a trilogy, because it encompasses everything. And then the idea of the chosen one was one that could control the Matrix from within. And that's what we got. Like that was I mean, spoiler alert to anybody.
Spoiler alert, yeah, for a 20-year-old movie.
Yeah. Like, Neo gets to break the Matrix and be the chosen one in a way, because bends the rules to Neo's whims and wills. And that's what we get at the end. So like going back and like restructuring, and you can see like how there's like more influence probably from like the producers and like the film going like, oh, like they're trying to force different agendas. So you can see that in the second and third one, which I think derails from like what was the original masterpiece. So I hope I think from the trailer, it seems that they're simulating everything that happened on the original one, which is interesting. And it goes like it almost I got the feeling that they circumventing like the second and third movies in a way.
I mean, I think there's points to that, and one of the things that I think, I mean, not to go too much into 2 and 3, right? Because I think we're gonna like talk more about 1, but it's a problem with most sequels, right? When you have like a first movie, and it happens in almost every movie, with probably the exception of The Godfather and Star Wars and some of those that have like basically perfect sequels. But it's like, where can like a story go, especially when the hero's journey, because like Matrix 1 is very closely looped around the hero's journey almost to a T.
Yeah.
Which I think is funny that they came out then in 1999, because you got Star Wars, which is also a movie that's very tied into Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and then you got The Matrix, which looks like it's in a completely different world, right? Because it's in computers and not in space, but the story is the same, right? As the hero who has the call to adventure and then refuses it at first, and then goes to adventure and has the mentor and like goes through all these steps. And where was I going with this? Oh, but then exactly where do you go once that story is kind of culminated in that cycle of the first movie? So especially when your character is a god, right? So Neo is a god within the Matrix. So like, not too many things can really challenge him, which is the Superman problem, right? But the movie's like, how do you challenge Superman, a character who has like all the powers? But I think it was interesting though, like how they tried to challenge Neo in 2 and 3, which is like not really to challenge his powers, but his notion of who he is within the story. Because at all this point, which I think is really interesting because of how it's set up in 1. Because in 1, when he sits down with Morpheus on the infamous red leather couch, and Morpheus asks him, "Do you believe like you're not in control of your own actions or indeterminism, whatever it is that Neo asked him?" Morpheus asked him, and then Neo's like, "No, I don't believe in that because I don't like the notion that I'm not in control of my own actions." And Morpheus is like, "Oh, I know exactly what you mean." But then Morpheus, even though he's offering Neo the red pill to break from that determinism and go into his path as the one, in 2, you can see that he's still in a deterministic path, right? And he's still fulfilling a role that's predetermined. So the challenge for him is not really to break free from not break free, to be challenged with his powers by an equal might, which is in this case, right, Agent Smith, but to his notion of determinism and his role in the story. And that's what he does in 2, is kind of break away from that and just choose his own path instead of like the path that was laid out for him, which I think would have been more interesting if like Trinity had played a bigger part into that role, because they really played their dyad, right, to bring it back into Star Wars a little bit, a lot into like how they're kind of a binary with each other and how they complement each other. But ultimately they kind of fail that relationship in 2 and 3, which I think is one of the interesting things of the trailer for Resurrections, which is like, it looks like Trinity is more powerful and is complementing Neo, and like them together can be a monad, right? Like Ty was talking about, she was last year when we were talking about Loki, and so become that monad, which I think is a way more interesting concept, right? Looking forward to Matrix 4 than in terms of Neo and Trinity's relationship than what we saw in 2 and 3. But in rewatching 2 and 3, I still think that they were trying to do something that was like not the conventional thing, and I think a lot of those things work. It's just that, again, like, how do you make something better when you already did something perfect?
Yeah. And before we walk away entirely out of that, because I wanted to keep talking about Trinity a little bit, because watching it, she was such a badass. And, she's like basically that opening scene, this woman, like super powerful, just kicking everybody's ass, super, super awesome. And then you kind of lose a lot of that edge from her in 2 and 3. And not only her badassery and not only her relationship with Neo, but the fact that, at the end of that movie, they basically do a reversal of the fairy tale trope You have Neo, the one that's like lying down in the ship, like he's Sleeping Beauty or Snow White, and she's the one that has to wake him up with true love's kiss, you know?
Right,
And she's
right,
the
right.
one that gives him the strength to believe in himself. So it's like this perfect reversal of the fairy tale. And then you kind of make her his bitch in the following ones, when it was originally the power dynamic was completely different.
Right.
You know, so that always really bothered me about 2 and 3, honestly. So hopefully we'll see, like you said, a return of the big, bad, powerful Trinity in this 4th film. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
But again, that's what's cool about Matrix 1 is that every character is so perfectly written to fulfill a perfect role, and they all have like such a purpose in the story that, I mean, not a single line is wasted, and like they all fall like, not each character, they're not a cliche, but they fill a role that specifically helps Neo in his journey, and especially the Trinity, right? Trinity, Morpheus, and Neo are like expertly written to kind of complement each other. And obviously we can't talk about a Trinity and a chosen one without kind of talking about God and his little kid Big J, because obviously Neo is a messianic figure, and there's a lot of things from Christianity that kind of fall into like his story, and especially if you look at it as the trilogy of films, right? With his with his birth in Matrix 1, and then his ultimate sacrifice and death, right, with big quotations, air quotes, in 3, but which he's even sprawled, right, in cruciform, in a cruciform when he passes away, which obviously kind of sets up resurrection, right? Because what Jesus' final hat trick was coming back from the dead, so it only makes sense that that Neo was coming back. So I kind of like that the film was doing all these things to kind of appropriate different aspects of philosophy and religion to kind of forge its own unique story, which again, to kind of tie it back to Star Wars, is what Star Wars did, right? He was George Lucas was taking things from fairy tales and the Flash Gordon stuff and sci-fi and all these things that like westerns, right, and all the things that like influenced them, and just mushed them together to make one thing that was like uniquely his. And the Wachowskis did the same thing, right, with the Matrix. They took all the things that were interesting them and created like this whole unique world that is a part of, but detached from all the things that they like are really into. And I don't know, for me, the Matrix holds a really special place because it's one of those movies that kind of started making me have more interest in things beyond films, and like taught me that a movie can it can be entertainment, and you can enjoy it in the big screen and like go home and like never think about it again, but it can also give you an extra dimension, right? And be like, oh, where does this come from? And it's like, oh, that book that Neo's holding, it's called Simulacrum Simulation. Is that a real book? Let me look it up and research it. Oh shit, it's a book about philosophy. Let me look into it. And then 20 years later, I haven't read the book, but whatever. But at least I was interested in it, and start reading and researching all these things to kind of start giving the movie more meaning through like rewatches and researching, which I think is extremely valuable, at least for me personally, in my development and like how I started to like look at films.
Oh, absolutely. And it gives like, and going back to what we're talking about, Nan, in the beginning, like depending on when you catch this movie, it will have different like repercussions, and like as at least from my first watch, I remember it was all about like, oh wait, are we living in a simulation, and being freaked out about that. Like,
am I in the Matrix?
Am I in the Matrix? Is this, am I pinching, or am I tasting the food, or is it just the interaction of particles? And then, but watching now, it's almost like, oh yeah, yes, like it's almost like the idea of like, this is a simulation, is totally okay. I'm like, it probably makes more sense than it being reality. I mean, we're just fleshy donuts that sort of like analyze everything, and our mushy cortex makes it all together and gives us a movie that's already been proven to be a simulation and complete hallucination. Like, so
which is what Baudrillard, right, it kind of says like in his treatise, right, that we, in our postmodern world, like the simulation is more powerful than the reality. and
but
now
but
it's indistinguishable.
I think even Butcher like stays like is afraid to take the next step. That
Oh, the movie is, yeah.
that even if it was not a simulation, we are still only experiencing our own simulation of it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, one of like the best scenes, it's so innocuous, but it's the tasty wheat scene
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
where I think it was Mouse, the kid was like,
Yeah.
how do I know how does
Fun
even the
fact,
machine,
he
how
was
does
in episode 2. Yes, fun fact.
of Star Wars?
Yeah, he was when Obi-Wan and Anakin are searching for the changeling that was trying to assassinate Padme, and they walk into the bar, and then Obi-Wan's ordering the drink, and the kid's offering him death sticks. That's Mouse.
So
That's completely random.
like,
So
Worlds collide.
it's the
anyway,
Keanu
continue,
verse.
Mo.
so, so yeah, so the fact that that conversation, and I think that conversation actually is the core of the movie, because and it ties to that. I think it might actually be the biggest tie to the philosophy, the Bourdieu's philosophy, which is what I think this tastes like, or it's the idea of like, how do I know that I'm looking at red, and then you're looking at the same thing that you're seeing red? Is your red the same as my red? So what ends up happening is we can never verify it, but our minds simulate that, yes, you are seeing the same as I am, because I have no other idea, or I can't even come up and imagine something different. That's how ingrained we are in our crappy simulation, that you can't imagine anything else being red. And why? So I can see like,
and that's why chicken tastes like anything, because they
Yep.
couldn't figure it out.
So it's a beautiful interaction. Like, what the hell does tasty wheat taste like? And then it adds the other layer. So what happens? So they're trying to break away from the matrix, but they're still living in what will come next. Like, are they going to create tasty wheats that were based on the matrix, or are they going to create tasty wheats based on what? So whatever comes after the destruction of the matrix, it's going to be a crappy simulation of the matrix at the end of the day.
A simulation
So
of a simulation.
Yeah, it's going to be a simulation of a simulation until it loses everything. And that's the beauty of it. Like,
it's very postmodern of you. Very postmodern. we can never find meaning.
never find meaning, because there is no meaning. Because at the end of the day, it's just particles interacting with particles. The meaning is just our cortex. Like, it's almost like that brain of ours that has to define, like, there's something and make sense of things. But there's no intrinsic need for why to exist. It's just happened to be.
Yeah, so things have meaning because we give them meaning. We attach it to the things. So, but I think one of the wonderful things that it does is that film, like, it just messes with our psyche, because there's so many things that are unexplainable, like deja vus, or that moment when you wake up from a dream and the dream feels more real than what's supposed to be reality, or those strange moments when you look at yourself in the mirror and it's like, is that me? Is that what I look like? And then they use all of those things to explain that that's proof that the matrix is real. So, you leave always thinking about that. Every time something weird like that happens, like, am I in the matrix? What's happening? So I think they did a really good job of just like making that very relatable to everybody. It's like, oh shit, that's just weird. So I think that's also one of the things that's like really good about how it was made. So,
and it's not
sticks
even
with you.
And it's not far away from like some current theories on this is a 3-dimensional rendering of a hologram that we tend to experience in this specific time and space, but it's just nothing. It's just that probably some universe that died billions and thousands of years ago, that somehow information remains, and we're either privileged enough or dumb enough, which there might be a fine line between both, to actually believe that this is real.
Oh wow.
That's the purple pill, which I think Resurrections has to
purple
talk
pill.
about. It's like, what if it's neither here nor, which I think is the point, right? Of like when we were talking about the movie not actually doing what the source material, right, simulacra and simulation was establishing, because it's like the simulation becomes a simulacra, and we're like caught in the world that's like indistinguishable from the reality and the simulated. And which is what you're saying more, right? That we're in this place where like we can't tell, but ultimately it becomes a philosophical question, right? If we can't tell, what does it matter, type of thing, because it's indistinguishable. But anyway, the point is that well, the movie was dividing it, right, into like red and blue pill. What if that's what Resurrections is going to explore? It's like there is no red and blue, and it's actually the purple pill, and like we're actually all like the machines and the humans are actually like intercrossed in this like shared simulation.
Yes,
that they can't break. We just have to coexist.
Because then at the end of the day, the red and blue pill, it's a binary choice. You're breaking, you're still destroying the unity of that consciousness. Doesn't matter if it's organic or artificial, quote unquote, because it's how artificial is our intelligence. It's equally as artificial, but I think AI is a misleading term. That's a story for another day, but but then that's the crux, is our reality is nothing. Like, it's just that lost metaphysics where everything keeps growing around and around it, and that's okay. Like that's probably that's the purple pill. Like, it is okay to not have a binary choice. Like, it's okay to live in everything that's real and everything that's imaginary. What's the only thing that's stopping you? It's your brain taking that, like making that choice that, oh, this is real, this is not. But when we dream, that feels real. When we go on, when we go on meditation, and there are even levels of call like jhanas, like you actually experience a reality that is completely separated from this reality, yet your brain and everything, your body, it experiences everything as real, and you learn and grow from those experiences. Heck, you can be 1,000 years meditating and you experience 1,000 lives, and then come back and you're like sitting there 3 hours later. Is that
you mean Doctor Strange vibes?
Well, because then you have to ask yourself, is that not real? And therein lies, if everything that's real is just an interpretation of our electrical input, then it is real.
Which is what Morpheus tells Neo when he's like, what is real? If it's what you can see, what you can taste, what you can touch, then it's just chemical impulses that are interpreted by the brain.
Yep.
And that's it. And that's the beauty. So,
or horror, depending on who you're asking, right?
Or horror. Which is why, like, rewatching it, I was so fond of Cypher. At first, like, to me, it was like, I didn't care for Cypher whatever times I watch it, but now it was like, wow, this is such a lovely character. Because it's the one, it's almost like you step out of like Plato's cave, you see everything as it is, and then you purposely want to go back, and on top of that, forget that you ever saw what's outside, which leads into like a chicken and the egg problem, because then if you forget that you ever saw the light, you're also going to forget why you looked for the light. So whenever something else triggers that search for the light, you're not going to remember, so you're still going to look for it, and you're still going to end up outside of the cave,
the same place.
So I just love like Cypher willingly was like, I don't care if this steak is fake.
Yeah,
My
it's
brain.
delicious.
It's delicious.
I mean, I can't blame him, especially when they're eating that, crab goop thing at the Nebuchadnezzar. I'm like, he has a point.
I mean, it's a completely, we can sympathize with that. It's like out here, it sucks. If you can plug me back in and I'm a millionaire and I can do whatever I want, yeah, I'm going back into the Matrix.
But that's the interesting thing though, because it's still talking about like a power dynamics within the Matrix. He doesn't want to come back just to be in the simulation.
Of course.
He wants to come back in a position of like not having to worry about the simulation. So in a way, maybe, and I mean, this gets, more into more philosophy, right? About like, who he is, would it change if his environment in life is completely different? Because maybe he was searching for that truth of what is the Matrix, because he was like, maybe he was like a Neo type person who was, working 9 to 5 and trying to make the bills and like, upset with where the world is. But if he's a millionaire, he doesn't have a problem. Or maybe he would have a problem because he would be unsatisfied with that life. Who knows? I mean, that's, nature and nurture type of thing that like we can't ever decipher, I think, especially with characters within a movie. But I mean, I don't know. It's Joe Pantoliano. I like that actor.
Yep.
He's always funny in everything he is. He's in. So, but but the thing is, as compelling as him as a character was in terms of like his betrayal, right, or his crew members, is I can't get over him, attacking Tank. For me, Tank and Dozer, they were so,
I agree.
they were such they were the teddy bears of the crew. So I was like, don't hurt them, they're precious. Don't touch the operator. So I can't forgive him. I can't forgive him despite any interesting
philosophical repercussions.
Yeah.
Completely get it. I'm just I was surprised by myself that I was like, this character is really interesting. It's just it changes the dynamics. It's the antithesis of Neo. Neo is like I don't whatever. Like even if questioning my past memories, they're fake. Even though Trinity is like, well, it means that you can do whatever you want. But it that still faces a very pragmatical problem within yourself. Like, does it matter does anything that ever occurred to me matter, or vice versa? Did anything that I learn is actually the truth? So even though it opens up the door, it also opens up the door for trauma. Like I think that's like kind of like what Morpheus was saying, like, oh, after a certain age, we don't break people away from the Matrix because it's so hard for our brains to grasp that alternate reality. But Neo is the one that kind of like Luke, like, oh, it's older, we're still gonna plug him out somehow. The brain is gonna be like, yes, I want this, and break away from it. It's that idea that both had a choice. Like Cypher's choice was to go back to the Matrix and forget. Neo's choice was to forget the Matrix and learn about what's reality. So they are both like yin yang figures within this like dynamic of the story.
Yeah.
Which is why
definitely.
Well, it's interesting to see them as yin yang, just because you can also see Neo as a yin yang with Smith, because Smith also he's searching for the same things as Neo, but just as Obi-Wan would say, from a different point of view, right? Where Neo just wants to break free from the simulation because he wants freedom and truth. Like Smith just wants to break out because he wants to like oppress and destroy. So it's like different purposes. They're same goals with different purposes. And like I think it's even more highlighted, right? And Reloaded specifically, because I think even though Revolutions isn't as problematic, it's not problematic, as mediocre as I remember, it's still the weakest of the three, but it's the one that has the least to say, at least to me, because it's so focused on the action, right, of like what happens in Zion and what happens in the final fight with Neo and Smith, that it kind of like doesn't find the time to start talking about the issues that the characters encounter, as opposed to in Reloaded, where we actually see, Neo and Smith talking about like who they are and what they're doing and why they want to do it, and like in different places, like either on the Burley Brawl after Neo talks to the Oracle, or like in the hallways when they're with the Keymaker. It's like a lot of opportunities where you see like that Smith and Neo are technically there's lots of binaries, right? In that sense, like Neo is a binary of Smith, just like with Cypher, just like with Trinity. So like all these like not opposing, but opposing or complementary positions where like each character kind of plays off of the other one in some way. So I don't know. It's again, it's like you were saying, Mo. It's like with every rewatch of the movie, especially with the with the advantage of having seen it a long time ago, it kind of gives it that much richness in the tapestry, right, of its storytelling.
It's so rich in so many different like aspects. Like you already mentioned, there's the Christianity, but there's also like that whole oral when Neo was like in the waiting room, and you see like different either like psychic kids, or you see like like a monk, or and they're all from different religions or philosophies that actually claim that there's a nothingness aspect to it all. Like everything, and that was very I love that. I mean, they I don't know why they chose
say it. Just say it.
It's I guess the kid might seem like whitewashed. Like,
yeah,
you're bringing like a Buddhist monk. Like why bring a white kid? Like,
but it's interesting. I mean, I see your.
I mean, it can be. It's possible. Don't get me wrong. Anybody can be a Buddhist.
I see your point though, but kudos to the Matrix though, and the trilogy as a whole actually, for having like a super diverse cast, which I think it's something that's not really talked about a lot, because one of the main characters of the Matrix, obviously Morpheus and Trinity, so you have like an African American man and a woman as part of like the main trio of characters. Like you have a bunch of like black characters, and you have Asian characters too. So there's like a lot of representation in that movie. Even before like this whole representation discussion started going into full steam, like it has nowadays. So that's something that I really noticed now in my rewatch that I obviously wasn't as cognizant of when I saw it the first time, because when you watch something when you're younger, you don't think about those things because they're not internalized. But once you're aware of them through a rewatch, it's like, oh, you start those things kind of pop out. And I think the representation in the Matrix is really good. I mean, obviously one of the things that goes against it is that the protagonist is still a white male. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, everything, the figures of power are still white people, even though you have
your Jesus Christ figure is still cis white dude. Like,
which I mean, it could not have been, because I think if I recall correctly,
it could have been Will Smith.
It could have been Will Smith, exactly. Which I think would have been a terrible choice, honestly.
I agree. Yeah. No.
I mean, because the problem with Will Smith is Will Smith is going to be Will Smith, and it would have become like Independence Day, and he would have had to say "woo" at some point in the movie. So the Matrix,
right when he's flying at the end. Woo!
Right. Yeah. The Matrix it's not a movie that needs to have a woo in it. It had a whoa, okay, it had a Keanu thing, but that's it. So I have strong feelings about Will Smith. I mean, good actor, but he does his thing, and I don't think he would have thrived in this role.
He's a good Will Smith actor, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly, and only he could be Will Smith.
And only Will Smith can be Will Smith.
Yes.
Or the Fresh Prince.
Well, now they're doing the not to kind of go into a tangent, but they're doing a reboot of
really?
Fresh Prince. And Will Smith already announced who's gonna be like his new Will. So I'm not gonna watch that. It's just I don't have time. I'm watching too much stuff right now. So I wish them well, but I'm not gonna waste my time.
Well, anyway, going back to the Matrix, another good thing that we have Keanu Reeves is that now we have Resurrections, and he basically looks exactly the same because he's a vampire.
He's a vampire, man. No, the only thing we were robbed of is because of COVID. One of the COVID. we were going to be blessed with two Part 4 sequels on the same day. We were supposed to get John Wick 4 and Matrix 4 on the same day, but then COVID happened, and obviously the schedules got shifted, and like we will not be blessed with the double Keanu Fest, unfortunately.
Keanu Fest.
Yeah, oh my God, Keanu Fest. Yeah, Keanu sounds. It's all. We were robbed.
I was kind of joking. Like, technically, if the Matrix really wanted to go meta, Neo could upload a John Wick program onto himself,
destroy everybody,
and destroy John Wick, Neo,
the Keanuverse.
Oh, I want to watch that movie. The only movie that I want to have excluded from the Keanuverse, though, is Dracula, because he was objectively terrible in that movie. He was so bad in Dracula. That's just like, okay, I will forgive it.
Well, that gives credence to why Keanu is a vampire. He will actually portray Dracula wrong, because to him that's not how vampires do. Like,
yeah. Oh my God. How do you have Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins, and then anyway, whatever. We're not talking about that movie. He did great in The Matrix, and he hasn't aged a day, so he'll do great. And Carrie-Anne Moss is also, she's also looks great.
She looks amazing.
She looks amazing. She looks. I'm gonna miss Lawrence Fishburne though.
Yeah, me too.
Although Jaja Abdul-Mateen II is in the movie, and like we are living in his world right now. He's been in so many movies and good movies lately. I was a little apprehensive about his casting, but I've been seeing like a lot of his movies that have come out of late, especially Candyman, in which he was fantastic in. And I'm like, okay, it's Jaja's world and we're living in it, so I'm okay with it. And who knows, maybe Lawrence Fishburne's Morpheus will come back in some way, because there's lots of things that we have to see, like how it ties into like the continuity of the original three, but also the Matrix video game that had come out. I think it was an MMO, that was an online game that was allegedly canon. And in that game, Morpheus was killed because he was doing terrorist attacks on the Matrix so that they could return Neo's body or some stuff. I never played it, so I'm just like repeating what I've read, and I could be wrong. Yeah, so technically, apparently, in the canon, and I use that word cautiously, of the Matrix, that version of Morpheus is dead. So I don't know if I think it's Lena that's directing this one. If Lena's gonna like use that in her story for how Jaja's Morpheus fits into like the old Morpheus. So
or it could be like a reboot of the Matrix. They'll look. I think we got, or at least I saw the trailer wrongly, but it seems like there was like an Oracle-ish.
I think that's Sati from Revolutions, the one with the big glasses.
Yeah,
I think that's Sati, from the little girl from Matrix 3, all grown up.
Okay.
I think that's I think that might be her, and maybe she took up the Oracle
Oracle's mantle.
Oracle. Which is something, before I forget, something that I just learned about the Oracle that blew my goddamn mind. It's one of those things that you never pick up, right? It's like, one of the things that the Oracle does a lot in the movies is that she's always smoking, especially when she's like oracling, right? To use Oracle as a verb, I guess. And one of the reasons for that, like, I thought it was just like, well, yeah, she smokes, whatever, people smoke. But I think one of the interesting things I read about that is because she's based off the Oracle of Delphi, or Delphi, however you say it. And those oracles needed to have like the smoke and stuff so that they can, make their prophecies and whatnot. So that's her version. That's their version within the Matrix of the Oracle of Delphi. It's like having her smoke, because you notice that she only starts to smoke when she starts to talk about like those things. Which when I learned that, I was like, oh shit, see this movie?
That just blew my mind. That just blew my mind.
Yeah. I thought it was like smoke and mirrors kind of thing. Like,
well, that too, right? Because the movies also have a bunch of mirrors in it too. So like everything's game. If it makes sense, it was probably intentional.
Through the looking glass.
I think everything is intentional on the Matrix. Sorry, Nani.
No, sorry, I just said through the looking glass. because it's
Oh,
not
yes.
Alice in Wonderland. There's two, and it's Follow the Right Rabbit and Through the Looking Glass for
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland. So, and you have both of those elements in there. So I thought that was really, really cool from the beginning. I don't think I had noticed how much it was in there the first time I saw it around, and this time it just felt so much more psychedelic, like watching it years later and seeing all these things and those different philosophies of like going back to Cypher, voluntarily choosing to embrace ignorance versus trying to look for truth regardless of what the consequences of that truth will be. So there's so many things that you like rediscover, and I'm sure if I watch it again in a couple of years, I'll find new things to love about it. So
and even like random things like where Neo used to work,
Metacortex.
the metacortex. I was like,
I remembered that I had Googled it. I had Googled it because like it blew my mind. I'm like, okay, metacortex. I know it has to do with the brain, but if you look it up, it's divided obviously in two words, which is meta and cortex. And obviously, meta is to go beyond or higher or transcend, and then cortex is the boundaries of the brain, the gray matter surrounding the brain. So the name of the company that he works for literally means to transcend the boundaries of the brain, which is like one of the things. Again, it's just like, oh shit, this is so
which is what Neo does at the end. Transcends the boundary of the brain, and that's I hadn't noticed before. Like at the end, like I always knew there was the waving thing that happened after, but I hadn't tied it to it being Neo's breathing, and it ties back to that fight that Neo had with Morpheus when he was like,
"You're breathing now."
Is that air you're breathing now? And then now he's breathing the Matrix. The very aspect of breath is the Matrix changing, and that
I love that. Wow.
I did not catch that one. Thank you.
It took me 20 years to catch it, but
holy shit. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that.
It was beautiful. That and that. I feel like we're jumping all the scenes, but I love it. But
well, I mean, at this point, I think everyone that's listening, if anyone's listening, they've seen the movie. So like, just, we're not here to tell them what the movie's about.
What the movie's about,
But that. So right after Neo learns Kung Fu, which is like keyword to
Kung Fu.
Heck, I learned every single martial arts and like combat training ever.
Just like John Wick.
Just like John Wick. And then they go into the sparring room, and I love their Morpheus's and Neo's gi. Like Neo's
black and
just
white and white and black.
But black. So and then Morpheus is black, but then white. And that's such a beautiful reference because technically they both have the same knowledge being probably like mastery, which is probably like I equated it to the black. That's why Morpheus' gi was completely black and Neo had that slim black trim. Yet it's in the adaptability, it's the open-mindedness that Neo kind of lacks. It's like everything's too bright. Everything is like, if everything under the sun is possible, then it's gonna be bright. It's gonna be blinding.
Which is literally what happens to him. It's like, oh, why do my eyes hurt? And it's like, you've never used them before. It's like overloading his senses.
And then vice versa. It's like Morpheus already has the knowledge, but knows how to redirect the light to be specific to what it needs. And that's Neo's journey. How do you redirect that light and use it with that darkness to actually bring forth whatever is the end? So
I mean, that scene for me, I've always loved it because there's so many good quotes in it, especially don't think you are, know you are, and stop trying to hit me. Like all those things like really stuck with me. But like I now put it like in contrast or comparison with like Yoda, right? And when he's training Luke down in Dagobah, especially when he's saying like do or do not, there is no try for me. Like that kind of harkens back to what Morpheus is saying. It's like don't try, just know. Because there's no trying, there's only being, and that's what like Morpheus is trying to teach Neo. So that's kind of like a fun little connection I had made like during these new rewatches that I made. That obviously I didn't catch back at the time when I was watching it. It's like those movies are separate movies. They have nothing to do with each other. But in fact, like they have everything to do with each other because they're all, cut from similar cloths, right? Of like one, the hero's journey, and two, like Zen Buddhism, right? Because George Lucas was interested in Buddhism and a lot of like things from Japan as well. So all of that philosophy kind of comes into Star Wars, not in as direct ways as Matrix does, but it's still there. So that's why, like, when I was rewatching that scene, it kind of reminded me all of a sudden again of Yoda and like that little kernel of nugget, and it kind of makes more sense the way Morpheus is talking about it, because you really have to bend over backwards to understand do or do not. It's like, wait, well, does that make sense? But I mean, it does, but you have to really try. But Morpheus was just like boom, on the money, I think, like all the time with every single quote. It's like 90% of everything that Morpheus says quotable.
Well, and even with the Oracle, who has to explain to him, you can't be who you are because somebody else tells you that's who you are. You have to find that truth in yourself, not in how others see you. So it also talks about, what Morpheus was trying to tell him, but he's actually doing it to him too, because he's so hell-bent on the fact that he is the one, that he feels the need that he has to convince him that he's the one. So he's contradicted himself there. So it's like, I don't know. There's just so many awesome lines and things that you just like have to pause sometimes and be like, wow, that's really, really intense. So I don't know. It was a joy to watch it again, really.
That scene with the Oracle when and she's like, oh, don't worry about that base. And then he knocks it down. He's like, oh, told you not to worry. And then she's like, what's really gonna bake your noodle is would you have knocked it over. I hadn't said anything. I was like, oh.
Yes, so good.
I like how she's just literally fucking with him. She's like, I'm fucking with you.
I know. Yeah, I'm fucking with you. Yeah.
But isn't that that's the Oracle? Wasn't the Oracle a program that just wanted to fuck around?
No, she doesn't want to fuck around. She was a behavioral program that helped build the Matrix with the architect, because the architect was trying to build a perfect Matrix, right? So that everyone would live in peace and harmony, but humans would just reject it because they weren't able to accept perfection. And so like the architect uses the Oracle because she's a program that's like intuits and is knowledgeable of human behavior. So he uses her, like them together, program the Matrix so that the humans could accept it. So she's the only way she can see into the future is because since she understands human behavior, she's basically playing chess, so she can see 20 moves ahead because she knows like what happens, because she knows how humans will act. But she's still on the human side because she's sympathetic to like their cause, so she wants to disrupt the Matrix, which is what she explains to Neo, right? And Reloaded, after she's like, oh, let's get the obvious out of the way, and he's like, you're a program. She's like, can't get more obvious than that, because humans can't see a future for shit. So I love that character. I didn't like when they recasted her in Revolutions, which I know they had to because the actress passed away, unfortunately, so they kind of had to work around that. But like that actress that portrayed the Oracle, she was just, perfect. I loved her so much.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the fact that the Oracle just if you all their words, they never actually, they don't even either deny that either you're predetermined or that you have a choice. But she does add the idea that you might have a choice. And that alone is powerful enough to disrupt the Matrix. It's because it doesn't matter if you have a choice or not. What matters is if you believe you have that choice. Anything else, it's up for grabs. And that's how I interpret that phrase of like, yeah, you have the gift, but you're waiting for something.
Well, it's what Morpheus said, right? It's like she told you exactly what you needed to hear. Because like if he had been told that he was, the one without him actually being ready or having the things that he needed to before actually believing it, then he would have maybe he would have stumbled on it. It's Devos, right? If she had told him he was, maybe he wouldn't have taken the step and would have not actually become it. So she's playing chess. She's fourth dimensional chess.
Mind games. Yeah. It's like you're gonna have the choice: either save Morpheus or you're gonna die.
And she knew that he was gonna choose to save Morpheus. So, which is what she says in Reloaded. In Reloaded, she says like, you're not here to make choices. You've already made the choices. You're here to try to understand why you make those choices. But what's interesting though is that even she couldn't see past those decisions, right? Because she's still playing the game within the deterministic nature of the Matrix. But then Neo's able to break from it because he has the two doors that he can go through when he's at the architect's office, I guess you could say, at the architect's office, and he chooses not to go the predetermined path and chooses to go out and save Trinity, which was set up, right? When he saved Morpheus. Like, well, he's always chooses to save his friends because he thinks about the individual, which makes him more human than just like abstractly thinking about the collective. And by doing that, he broke the pattern. He broke the wheel, right? To talk about Game of Thrones now. And by doing that,
but did he or what? Was Neo always going to choose to save her?
It based on now it's speculative based on what we know from the movie. I mean, based on what we know from the movies, he is supposed to go through the door and reset the Matrix because that's what happened 5 times before, or 6 times. I forget which version he is. So that's his predetermined path based on all the ones that came before him. Yeah.
But then, which is interesting because then that brings then that quote that's like, oh, repeating the same thing over and over again, that's the madness. So you then have to, because it gets, if you're running a program and Neo is a subset, both, and then I guess you hit the point on the Oracle, kind of goes back to like the Gödel's incompleteness theorem. You can never know everything if you are part of the system, because you will never be aware of what's going on within your perspective. You just assume it is, but Neo can break away from that. Neither the architect nor the Oracle can, but Neo can. So then, if Neo already knew that 5 times he already failed taking the same door, then by definition, he was going to be determined to take then the choice to save Trinity, because it's never worked before. So it has.
Well, maybe Trinity was the wild card. Well, and the architect says as much. Like all the other ones didn't love anybody because they cared about humanity, and Neo was the only one that had Trinity and had that dyad to keep tying it with Star Wars, which I think it's one of the cool things about establishing, right? What I not suspect, but I hope I'm interpreting from the trailer for Resurrections, and it's that Trinity and him are more connected than it was established like in these first 3. So I think she was like the odd thing in the equation that changed the path of the one.
It's love. Yeah. I mean, it's that's what happened in the very first movie. Like, it's love that resurrects. The only thing that resurrects death is love. Like, the only thing that wakes you up, like kind of Nani was saying, that reversed fairy tale trope. Like, it's but even, and this might just be a subset of our Western thinking that love is only like we
love is a bad.
We haven't expanded our knowledge of love like a lot of like on the Eastern and more like mythologies have expanded what love can be. So I want to see that if possible on the trailer, on the next movie, like, because you can have love for humanity. That was the
programming,
instead of just loving one person, which is like the ego side of love. Like, you can have love for everything. You can have love for lamp. Like,
True. But speaking though of the trailer, I think not to come into the final part of this discussion, I think has been really cool and really interesting, and hopefully it keeps going. Right, once Matrix 4 comes out, let's do a little reaction and speculation. Matrix Resurrections. Nanny, I really appreciate you watching it because I know you are not a fan of watching trailers before the movie comes out. But it's part of the job description of the podcast, I think. So I appreciate you sacrificing yourself and watching the trailer. So why don't we start with you as being the anti-trailer person in terms of like your reaction and hopes for Resurrections?
Reaction and hopes.
Yeah. So I had no idea what to expect, honestly, just because I wasn't a big fan of the sequels. I thought the first one just like was very good and you just didn't really need to add anything to it. So I had no idea what to expect. The trailer kind of blew my mind. It looks amazing. It's great to have so many of these characters coming back. Obviously, we've been talking about like Lawrence Fishburne not coming back is going to be a little sad, but so far we don't know if there's going to be some sort of cameo or something.
When the John Wick program comes in, then
the John Wick program.
Then we have Lawrence Fishburne from John Wick come in.
I am really looking forward, like we've already said a bunch of times, to how that relationship with Neo and Trinity is going to happen, especially because now you see that, you know, they don't have memories of what happened. That's what it seems like, that they don't recall everything that happened. It also makes me question, like, what are they going to do in terms of all these years in the first 3 movies trying to break free and they all end up back in the Matrix? So how much really was accomplished, you know? So I'm really looking forward to see how that plays in. And then I'm really intrigued also by the Neil Patrick Harris character that's kind of like the therapist. So I'm really looking forward to see how that, you know, plays into the new dynamics. Yeah, so we'll see. And it's going to be really hard to top, you know, a bad guy like Agent Smith, because Hugo Weaving it's something else.
He's a master, so right.
I know. So we'll see who the antagonist is going to say a lot about how this movie works, because if you do not have a good antagonist, you don't have a good film. So
true. Yeah.
So we'll see.
What do you think, Mo?
I to be fair, I saw the trailer after reading the first chapters of Simulacra and Simulation. So when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, they might actually be trying to save what the author said was wrong with the Matrix. It almost seemed that when I saw it, I was like, oh, they're doing a simulation of the Matrix, the original one. Because the scenes where that fighting scene where Morpheus and Neo are at, you can see
the Matrix movie playing in the background.
You can see the Matrix movie playing in the background. It's almost like it's gonna lead the question then, kind of like what Nani was saying, like, is this even the Matrix that we were living in before, or is this just who knows when simulations later of the Matrix that again things just reappear? And
it's a good point, because it might explain why the new Morpheus, Yaya's character, kind of has dual personalities in the movie, because sometimes he's like the Morpheus that we know, and other times he's like when he's like looking into the mirror and being confused, because maybe that's when he realizes that he's in the new Matrix, and
it's going to be interesting, because then you add the idea of like
Inception Matrix,
or even the idea of like the resurrections, like, which goes back to the actual the Matrix Resurrection. Does the resurrection entail complete, like you completely forget everything, or is the resurrection still tied to your persona, that character that? And I think that's what they're gonna explore. It's gonna be a simulation of the simulacra that was Matrix.
Interesting. That's cool. And I can definitely see it, because I mean, there were people online that were theorizing that this movie is gonna be only a follow-up to Matrix 1, but I mean, they must have seen a different trailer than the trailer I saw, because this trailer clearly is following Matrix Revolutions. Especially because
I saw the trailer and I thought it was the following Matrix 1.
well, if you one of the things that like one leads me like to see like, yeah, this is clear like continuations. Like one, the framing of the simulation is the simulation we see at the end of Revolutions. And Revolutions, when the Matrix resets, there's no green tint. Everything's like nice and beautiful again, like in the real world. And that's the simulation that we see at the beginning of the trailer. And then if you see like the quick shots that like you can't see, you see Neo with his eyes burnt out and his body like plugged in to like the same floor that we see like in Revolutions and stuff. So it's just like, okay, well, then this is clearly that Neo. Because if it's even if it's a reincarnation of Neo, I don't think it should look like Keanu Reeves or be called Thomas Anderson again. So the fact that it's still Keanu and it's still called Thomas Anderson is just like, it's a different person.
But I disagree with you. I think it's gonna.
You think they clone him every time?
No, well, no. I think as a program, you just copy paste what works, and you change what doesn't work. So all the Morpheus personas worked, all the Neo personas, they just had to tweak it. So it's a source code. It's just copy paste of the old Matrix. Sans.
But there's still a real. Well, the real people thing. Actually, it's interesting because in the trailer you see that Neo's reflection is not him, but that could be two things. It's either the Matrix fucking with his residual self-image and making him think that it's not him, or maybe that is what he looks like now, and like we just see him as like the idealized version of the one we saw in the previous movies. But I don't know. That's the cool thing about the trailer. It showed you enough to make you go crazy with theories, but not too much where you know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
The thing I'm most excited about though is like him and Trinity, because I think that was the thing that was kind of lost in 2 and 3, and in this trailer it looks like they're building that up to them being co-equals and like them both being a one instead of just him being the one. So I hope that's where that relationship goes, but we'll have to see. That's good. I think it's coming out on December 22. So not that long to wait.
It's gonna be nice. Fun.
Yeah.
Excited.
Good things coming in December.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm excited for it. I'm just really looking forward to it. Hopefully it blows our minds collectively again. But you know, if not, they can simulate the original one and make
we can, and that's the thing. Like just like we talk about Star Wars, if you don't like the new one, that's fine. Don't watch it again. Watch the ones you liked before, and it's fine. For me, I'm probably gonna see if they have Enter the Matrix in the PlayStation store, so I can play that game again. So I remember that game blew my mind when I after Reloaded came out, which was a really cool game because it actually tied into the events of the movie from different characters' perspectives, and they actually filmed extra scenes for the game. So I was like, oh shit, this is some interconnectivity that I've never seen before. So like I hope it keeps going, because I really love this world. So I just hope it keeps being a good world to keep talking about.
Yes. One last thought: if the Matrix, and there's just I'm broadcasting this to the universe. If the Matrix is real and Morpheus is real, pick me up and unplug me. I want to see the real world.
And then when you get replugged, let us know if it's worth it to be unplugged.
Exactly. I'll take the sacrifice. I'm totally.
Don't erase the memories. Just if you come back with the memories intact. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think with that we're done, right?
Until December 22.
Well, we are the Triad of the Force. We did not focus that much on Star Wars, but as if you really listen to us, you can tell that there are a lot of analogies between Matrix and Star Wars. So.
Yeah, there was something.
Prickles. We are Triad of the Force. Thank you for joining us. You can look for us wherever podcasts can be found, and on YouTube, just search Triad of the Force, Instagram, Twitter. We have t-shirts, and until next time, may the Force be with you.